Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in today. My name is Sri Sadhguru Buddha Rawa Bhagwan, and welcome to the Zenwara channel. Zenwara, the Heart of God, and the Heart of God symbol is the flag on this channel, with that pink background, the heart with the wavy line within it. So thank you for tuning into this video today. The purpose of this video today is to kind of follow up with some of my previous videos, what I was talking about recently with regards to stories. Okay, so what are stories? And I've talked about this in I think the previous couple videos or few videos on this channel. So you can refer to that before listening to this video if you're interested in that. So we've talked about stones, we've talked about, for example, bricks, we've talked about how vibrations can be absorbed and exist within those modelable materials, if you will, right? And how that can be used as a structure, if you will, a stone or a brick, for the residence, if you will, of a story, right? So a story can be associated and also exist within that stone. Okay, so understanding that stories, everything's a story, and stories within stories. Okay, within this greater computer in which we exist. I wanted to talk about a concept today. Having seen some videos recently about historical sites, and specifically historical sites where you find in the world where you find stones that have been built, or walls that have been built, and there hasn't been any mortar used. You see the stone has been basically cut into a way where no mortar was necessary, where it was a perfect fit, right, with that stone, right. Also, um, um, why was that done? All these questions. I was kind of thinking about that a little bit. And I want to talk about one concept, okay? And this is the concept that stories or vibrations get together, okay? Join together, okay? And why do they join together? For specific reasons, including developing together, okay? So almost in alliance, if you will. So in a way, for example, you can look at it very simply. Let's say you have a syllable, okay, and you add another syllable to it, and it makes a word, right? So those syllables developed into a word, into meaning, and developed a meaning, right? So them coming together developed, right? They develop together into that word, and now they are also part of that word, associated with that word. And as that word grows or is used more, or the concepts or anything that's associated to, they grow in a sense in development, as well as vibrations or sounds. So, so that's a concept to be aware of. So, I've talked about how, for example, you'll find an old stone building or something like that. If the stone was brought from far away, maybe purposely from a specific area or not. Why do you go to a specific area in the past? You ask. Why do some constructions in stone have stones that were carried for such long distances, right? Probably because there was a knowledge in the sense that those stones retained the stories, if you will, that they were exposed to, had specific stories, those stones, okay, within them. And then you can have dominant stories within the stones. You can have stones that have multiple stories, right? So for example, you can have one stone that ends up being dominated by one story, right? It's really part of that story, and a story exists within that stone as well, which can interact both ways with other stories. Okay, so for example, okay, um, why, going back to that example about mortar, okay, so we live in a little bit in a fairy tale, right? Okay, we live in a computer, and we have this world of what's wonderful around us, and all these things that we make it wonderful. We have eternal life, all these things, right? All these complexities, all angels, all Buddhas, right? um, you know Avatars. It's a wonderful world. Okay, there's lots of stuff going on at the level of things that are beyond the way regular senses and regular experiences. Okay, one of these things is the stories. So look at it this way. Okay, you have, let's say, one stone that's built, whether it's a keystone or whether whatever it is. Okay, so you have a stone, let's say, in a wall. Okay, and then you have another stone that's built to it, that's basically above it. Okay, and let's say with mortar or without mortar. Okay, and let's say they do have mortar. Okay, so what do we have? We have joints in between the stones, basically, right? So now, joints between the stones, what does that mean? Okay, so as you would purposefully, for example, build a house with specific stones, okay, or specifically from a specific area, or specifically fashioned as well, right? Taking on the stories potentially that are being fashioned into them as they're being fashioned, right? So those stones, let's say you build a wall. Well, now all of a sudden you have that stone that was independent of anything else, that's now in a unit with other stones, okay, with other stories potentially, and they're connected by joints, okay. And what are they? Why do stories? What do stories, for example, if they're connected together, they grow together, right? So what do we have here? It's kind of cute. We have joint development. Okay, so you have to watch out for these things. Okay, now you have stories that are developing together. Okay, that are basically developing together, that are trying to basically incorporate elements of one story and use them in the other one, and basically merge between those stories. Okay, so I actually I had a situation here where I needed to interact at the level of the one of the stories at one point. Okay, because what that story was, and it was basically in a specific location, and there was a stone that was one stone that was that was a devil story, the devil. Okay, and then what happened is the devil was trying to joint develop, okay, to basically obtain Shiva's third eye in a story. Okay, so which would have led to a situation where you have the devil with a third eye. Okay, which wasn't acceptable. Okay, so I had to intervene at the level of that story. So there's a lot of stuff going on at that level. Okay, as far as joint development of stories that are working together, stories that are not working together, stories that are competing for space, stories that have gotten together to compete for space or something like that. Okay, so you have to be conscious of stories, how they're interacting with each other, how they're interconnecting with each other, and as they're doing joint development, all that can take place of that. Okay, because there was the story, for example. Okay, there's the story in Kashmiri Shaivism, okay, that you can merge with Shiva and become Shiva, essentially, right? So that's a story. Okay, so all of a sudden you have other stories that can basically um, exist with that story as well, right? And then you had the devil, right, which was trying to develop the third eye, right, which would give him too much power in the stories. Okay, so basically, wanted to talk a little bit about that, concepts of joint development between stories, which you actually kind of cutely enough see as, the structure and the buildings that surround us, and then also, for example, you have specific industries that are developing together or something like that, or you have individuals that are developing together at the very fabric of our society. One way to see it very simply is the individuals that work within an organization or a business or something like that. Together. Okay, so developing together. Okay, getting together, and then why are they doing that? For profit and all these things, right? So okay, so I hope this talk helps show you a little bit more about how stories can get together, develop together, right? And how that can be a concern sometimes at some points, and that has to be regulated in a sense by the system in which we exist, right? And basically at that point, um, there's not too many there's not a reason to worry about these things. Once again, it's just a thing to be conscious of, to be aware of, right? And it's interesting to think about that concept of stories that are developing together, and then stories that are within stones. It's a very old yogic concept that you can put vibrations in stones, right? And you can basically people can basically communicate stories through what that stone has absorbed, basically, right? So at that point, that means you have stories within stones, right? And some of them are dominant within a stone. And then, okay, you have in one wall, you have a double stone, right? The double. And then another wall, right? So a joint development. Yeah. So just something to be aware of. And that can be used in a great way as well, when we're building our homes and all these things, as we're developing, in a sense, this world around us. For someone who's aware of these things, you can also, um, uh, let's say your home is built of brick or stone or other materials. You can also um, have an impact at the level of the presence you have and the relationship you have with a specific building, right? So, as there are stories within it and all that, and basically the identity of the building itself and the ownership of that building and all that, you can have a relationship with that, you know. And that's often why, if you have people who have stories of ghosts and things like that, right? Stories like that, and then what happens in those cases often is, when you're talking about ghost stories and all that, it's not dead people that are coming to visit or something like that. Ghosts in that sense, okay. What you have is basically the stories within a specific house or building. Okay, it's always it's always that haunted house or something like that. Within a specific area that is basically rejecting the individuals that are within it. Okay, so basically the ownership of the house is not complete, or the invitation has not been made to the people who are in residence of the home. Okay, so for one reason or another, it's that the someone retained ownership over that building, over that house. Okay, basically, so the entity of the accumulation of all the stories within that house, which make the greater story of that house, basically, has not accepted, is not accepting whoever is in that house. And that's why you would have, for example, an experiences of ghosts, things falling, things like that, as the house basically rejects whoever's in it. So basically, at that point, some people try to do renovations, they try to do different things to switch it up, to basically get a better understanding of how it's built and all that, and all the structure and all that, to try to retake possession of that hub or that residence, right? So there's a lot of concepts like that, and um, there's there's no point exactly in thinking about it too much at that point. If you're having for example, an experience of a house that you're not comfortable in, well, you should move. You should go to another one, right? It's probably an easier bet that than to try to convince the home that you're allowed to be there, right? Or to fully renovate it and hope that that solves the problem. So, yeah, so this video to talk about joint development of stories, okay, and bring it back to vibrations as well and sounds. As the first sounds met in space, and I witnessed this at the time of enlightenment, the first sounds meeting in space, right, in the void, ra and pata and mala and all these sounds, right, coming together and getting together to create a new combination, a new development of the story, a growth, right? A growth by growing together. Okay, so that's why the same concepts of vibrations, whether they be competing for space or getting together for growth, right? Or being absorbed by one another, the same concepts can basically be seen in everything and the existence and life that we have on an every daily basis, right? So thank you very much for listening today. If you're curious about more about these subjects, this was a very specific subject today, just talking about development of stories. If you're interested in the truth of existence as seen through enlightenment, the truth about who created us, why we were created, what's our purpose, and all these things, and that life is eternal. I invite you to listen to these the videos on this channel. It's actually the videos are actually made with the purpose that you would start at the beginning of the videos on the channel, and make your way forward, and your understanding would grow, as some videos do apply concepts that are talked about in previous videos. And also there's a lot of specific language from different cultures and traditions of the world that's used in these videos, and you will likely need to research some of that material at the beginning and become comfortable with it to fully understand the concepts that are presented and explained and detailed and revealed. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.